Hey guys, welcome to That Florida Feeling. Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you to everybody who helped me celebrate the 3rd anniversary or birthday of That Florida Feeling. I really appreciate all the happy birthday posts, and to every guest and person who has helped made it the last 3 years. Y'all are amazing. I would not be here going to the 4th year without you guys. I really appreciate it. Happy to have made all the friends that I have and have met all the people in the last 3 years. It's been a really cool journey. I'm glad that it's still going. Nobody's told me to shut up yet, so that's been kind of nice. So thank you to every one of you who has helped me get to this point and to continue going. Thank you to everybody who's interacted with the social media pages, the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Still kind of figuring out YouTube. Got the shorts down. Probably just going to stick to that. And the TikTok page. Thanks again, guys. You guys have really helped me on this. You guys are awesome. If you have a second, I really would appreciate a share. I'm not good at half this stuff, so any shares, anything like that really helps out the podcast. If you haven't left a review, that really does help too. Give it 5 stars on Spotify, 5 stars on Apple. All that really helps just to show people and to get it into the search for more people to be able to see the podcast. So thank you with that. I'm glad that most of us apparently need a vacation, judging by my poll question on Instagram. It is summer, although Florida is in monsoon season if you're in South Florida, which, I mean, it is kind of getting towards the rainy season, but that has been crazy. And then the shark attacks, that's insane. Like, usually that's New Smyrna Beach and that area. I don't know what's going on this year. Thoughts go out to all the people who were attacked, the little girl and the woman. That's just insane. And I mean, we used to live in that part of the Panhandle, and we saw sharks, but they weren't that close. They never got that close to the beach. And to see that, it's just insane. So be careful, guys, if you're going swimming. I did post a really cool little graphic that showed like the difference between the shark fin and the dolphin fin. So check that out if you are going swimming. If you're going into some water that's not quite as clear as the Panhandle or Clearwater, because let's face it, sometimes on the East Coast, up towards like Jacksonville, towards St. Augustine, it's not always quite that clear. Just kind of be aware of your surroundings, guys. Maybe don't go so deep. Because remember, we're just kind of visiting their habitat. They live there. So be careful. But do have fun on vacation. Don't forget to wear your sunscreen. It is hot. Summer has officially arrived in Florida, even though we're not quite. That's next week, I believe, when summer officially hits. But don't worry. The weather doesn't know that because it's already here. So today we're going to talk about something fun in Florida, someplace that I really, really like. We're going to talk about a little corner of the state that's usually overlooked. And it's overlooked because it's literally the top corner of the state, the top east corner. And that is Amelia Island. Amelia Island is the very northeast corner of the state of Florida. It's one of my favorite places. If you're like, well, that's Jacksonville. No, this is actually more north of Jacksonville. Yes, there is something north of Jacksonville that is still considered Florida. Amelia Island is part of the Sea Island chain that runs from South Carolina to Florida. And Amelia Island is the southernmost sea island. And it is the northernmost of the barrier islands on Florida's Atlantic coast. The island is in Nassau County. And it is actually very large, as it is only 13 miles long and 4 miles wide at its widest point. So it's considered large for an island, but it's actually very small. However you want to say that. For being its size, don't let it fool you. It is actually full of charm, and it's actually packed full of history. It's actually got a lot of history that encompasses a lot of different countries, and a lot of different communities. In fact, the communities of Fernandina Beach, Amelia City, and American Beach are located all on this one little tiny island. And we're going to talk about them today. So where did Amelia Island get its name? The island is actually named after Princess Amelia, daughter of George II of Great Britain. But Amelia Island has changed hands so many times between colonial powers before becoming part of the United States that Amelia Island has the distinguishing fact of having 8 different flags flown over it since it has been claimed. So, it has had 8 flags. It has French, Spanish, British, Floridian Patriot, that's one flag, the Green Cross, Mexican, yes, Mexican, Confederate, and of course, lastly, the United States. So it has a lot of history for being kind of a young, old part of the United States, and we're going to talk about it today. Now, of course, the very first people to inhabit the island didn't really have a flag, and it was first inhabited by the Timucuan people around the year 1000, and they named it, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Napoica? I'm going to go with Napoica, Napoyca, and I'm sure somebody out there is yelling the correct pronunciation at me. But they actually stayed on this island until about the 1700s, when it was inhabited by other people. Now, of course, they were visited long before the 1700s. They were actually first visited by explorers in 1562, and that would be the French. Jean Ribault first came to the island as a European visitor. But, of course, the island soon came under Spanish rule once the French had been run out of the area by 1573 officially. And the Spanish Franciscans had established a mission on the island. They actually established the Santa Maria de Cena mission on the island. And I so want to make a bad John Cena joke and ask if you could even see the mission, but I will. There's your joke. But yeah, the Santa Maria de Cena mission on the island was established, and they renamed the island Isla de Santa Maria. The Spanish eventually relocated the Mocama people to the island. So they took the Mocama people that were kind of towards Jacksonville, St. Augustine, and they put them on this island with another group of Timucuan, and they had two different specific dialects, and you can just imagine kind of how that went. Just because they are kind of under the same umbrella group of people does not mean that they are the same people. So you can imagine that was wonderful for both groups. Now, the area, sustained as much as it could after it was visited by different groups, and the Indians survived as best they could. The Indians didn't survive well after, of course, the Spanish and the French because, of course, the diseases came and went, and, they were kind of wiped out. You've heard me rant about that in other podcasts, so I will not do that on this one, I promise. But the area was under constant raid from the British during the late 1600s, which is as the settlers were coming into the New World. And these raids were caused by the Gaul Indians from Georgia, and this really kind of caused the Spanish to relocate all their missions to the island. So things, again, were getting moved around thanks to these raids. And the raids eventually kind of became a full-on invasion of Florida in 1702. And that was thanks to Georgia's colonial governor, James Oglethorpe, which caused the Spanish to altogether abandon those missions. So Amelia Island was pretty much just, you're on your own. And then Oglethorpe kind of took over the island, and he renamed it Amelia Island at that point in honor of Princess Amelia. Even if it did still belong to the Spanish, he was going to take it over and rename it something that would pretty much just piss them off, and he did. The island kind of became a buffer zone at that point between Spain and Great Britain. People did live on it, but it was just kind of like no man's land. And this really kind of stayed that way between Spain and Great Britain until the Treaty of Paris in 1763, when Spain traded Florida to Great Britain because they wanted Havana back, because Havana was always seen as a better use to Spain. Because Florida was just kind of Florida. It was a territory, but it wasn't a great territory. Let's face it, it's Florida. Now, this treaty actually established the St. Mary's River as East Florida's northeastern boundary, and that also established basically Florida's state line with Georgia. Still exists today. So the island became known as Egmont Island after Lord Egmont, who had a 10,000-acre plantation that covered most of the island. Egmont was rich, and he was developing the island that he wanted to use it the way he wanted, and basically what he was doing with it was he created a massive indigo farm with, it said forced labor, but let's call it what it was. It was slave labor at that time. Egmont eventually died in 1770, and the estate was taken over by his wife, Lady Egmont, who continued to work the farm and develop the island with a community. So she created a little community around this plantation, which I'm assuming was either friends or relatives or people who were indentured servants at the time. And that happened until the plantation was destroyed in 1776. Darn. Now, the island eventually became a place for new settlement until the late 1770s, early 1780s. So after the plantation was destroyed, free for all, anybody who existed, kind of just new settlement, picked up the pieces, kept going. And this became that new settlement because the British loyalists were actually now fleeing Charleston and Savannah, because in the late 1770s, 1780s, we were having the Revolutionary War. So the colonists were trying to fight for their freedom, and people who were still loyal to Britain, were trying to survive. So they came down to Amelia Island, and they created what is called Hillsborough. And they created Hillsborough, and the settlement remained even as the Spanish actually regained control after Great Britain lost the colonies to the newly formed United States. Amelia Harbor was the point for loyalists to leave the colonies, and they tore everything down to take it with them. All of the wood was taken with them for the nails and any windows, and anything that they thought that people could use to rebuild was tried to put on ships and or destroyed, because they just didn't want those new people to have a chance. Well, I guess it happens. Some people just are sore losers. So, once the loyalists and troops left, it was just Mary Mater and her children and a slave worker as the sole occupants of an entire island. So, this one lady, her kids, and a slave were the entire people living on this island, and she received a grant of property on the bluff overlooking the Amelia River. She was pretty much allowed to remain by the Spanish as long as she flew the Spanish flag while they held the territory. She was pretty much just left to live in peace. She was given what is today Old Town Fernandina. So if you've ever been to the Old Town part of Fernandina, you know she had a pretty nice area. The Spanish also stayed on the island away from her, and they platted the town of Fernandina in honor of King Fernandina VII of Spain. So the little island is attempting to grow again. On March of 1812, Amelia Island was invaded and seized by insurgents of the United States, calling themselves Patriots of Amelia Island, under the command of General George Matthews, a former governor of Georgia. These people cannot leave Florida alone. The fun thing is, though, is that this action was approved by President of the time, James Madison. He did not want the Spanish that close, and he decided that he was just going to attack. Secretly, of course. So, George Matthews has now attacked Fernandina. Well, Amelia Island. I'm going to call it Fernandina, but it's Amelia Island. And the harbor was lined with gunboats that were pointed at Fernandina. And a flag was sent to Don Justo Lopez, the commandant for the fort and Amelia Island, and demanded his surrender. Lopez knew he could not win. He acknowledged the superior force, and he surrendered Fernandina. The Patriots controlled the island and raised their own standards. Madison was sent word that the Patriots had the town, so the U.S. promptly sent 250 troops on the next day. The Patriots then surrendered to the U.S. without a shot fired, and Amelia Island now belonged to the U.S. The Patriots only flew their flag for one day, but that's one of the 8 flags flown over Amelia Island in its historical period. Now, President Madison and General Matthews had actually planned the attack and wanted to annex East Florida that entire time. Congress was upset at the actions that had taken place because they were left in the dark, and they knew that these actions could have upset Spain and possibly brought another war, a war that they didn't have the money for as a new country. General Matthews was promptly taken out of command, and they began negotiations to withdraw the troops in the early 1813. The U.S. were officially removed by May, and Spain regained control quickly. They finished construction of the new Fort San Carlo to guard Fernandina. They were not going to give up efforts, though, to get Florida. The U.S. always wanted Florida. So they continued with insurgent efforts, raids, scare tactics, things like that. Eventually, Gregor MacGregor comes along, a Scottish-born soldier of fortune, and he's going to lead an army of 150 men. Some of these men were vets of the War of 1812, and he is going to lead an assault against Fort San Carlos. On June of 1817, June 29th, the commander, Francisco Morales, struck the Spanish flag and fled. I guess he wasn't feeling it that day. He just said, nope, I'm out. So MacGregor raised his flag. That would be the Green Cross of Florida. That is when the Green Cross was raised over Amelia Island. And he claimed it to be the Republic of Florida. He actually managed to hold Amelia Island until September 4th. So June, July, August, almost little over 3 months. He held it until September 4th. When facing Spain again, having a lack of money and absolutely no reinforcements, he abandoned his plans to conquer Florida and said, goodbye, I'm going to the Bahamas. He did leave a small unit of men to try and hold the fort. Well, as the Spanish eventually got mad and decided that they wanted their land back, September 13th, the Battle of Amelia Island took place. The battle started when the Spanish built a battery of 4 brass cannons on McLaura Hill, east of the fort. They had 300 men and 2 gunboats as they fired on Fernandina. The forces that were at Fernandina were about 94 at that time, with 2 privateer ships and 1 armed schooner, which that schooner is barely countable. The Spanish fired from 3 in the afternoon until dark. 2 Spanish were actually lost in the battle, and they eventually withdrew when they didn't think they could take back the island. So, 94 men, 2 privateer ships, and 1 armed schooner managed to hold off a lot of Spanish and killed 2 of them. The men who had stayed behind had defended the island and eventually joined forces with a French-born pirate, Louis Michel Ary, who claimed Amelia Island supposedly on behalf of the Revolutionary Republic of Mexico. Yes. So now Mexico has made claim to Amelia Island. I don't even know that Mexico knew Amelia Island had even existed at this point, but it doesn't matter because now they have claimed Amelia Island under a French-born pirate. The pirate had actually been associated with MacGregor, who had first taken the island, and they had met. Louis Michel Ary and MacGregor had actually met during pirating adventures sometime in South America. Ary took the island and created an administrative body of the Supreme Court of the Floridas, because apparently there's plural Floridas. He had people to draw up a constitution and encouraged everyone to distance themselves from the Spanish rule that actually governed the Florida territory. Ary controlled Amelia Island for a few months and actually flew the Republic of Mexico flag over the island. So, between the pirates, Amelia Island was actually kind of making it. And the Spanish just kind of gave up, I feel like, at that point. Now, the U.S. still wanted to annex Florida, and eventually they did send the Navy to capture Amelia Island on December 23rd, 1817. Ary surrendered the island and then stayed on the island another 2 months, pretty much as an unwelcome guest. It's like you just couldn't get rid of him. The U.S. was holding Amelia Island in trust for Spain at the time, pretty much just kind of keeping it. The Spanish really wasn't happy about the U.S. sending the Navy to take over the island, but they didn't really know what else they could do about it, so they eventually just gave Florida to the U.S. The proclamation of the Adams-Onis Treaty gave U.S. East and West Florida, so they got all the Florida territory, both east, which would be St. Augustine, and west, which is Pensacola, in 1821, which is how the U.S. got the Florida territory fully. Now, the island was abandoned after it became a U.S. territory and began being developed by private citizens at that point. So, no, not really more of a fort town anymore, just more of like a city at this place. Plantations were established on the island, and the area really kind of grew with slave labor. The island was eventually taken over by the 3rd Regiment of Florida in the days leading up to the Civil War, as they took over Fort Clinch. Now, Fort Clinch had been built. It's a big stone masonry fort that pretty much overlooks one of the beaches right at the northern tip of Amelia Island that kind of overlooks Georgia. And they pretty much did this just days before Florida seceded, so probably planned. Federal workers had abandoned the site to the regiment. Robert E. Lee had actually even come to the fort several times, noting what good standing the fort was as to where it was. And it's definitely a high ground. It's definitely up on a bluff, like if you've ever been, and I'll post plenty of pictures. I love Fort Clinch and the area. It is definitely on the high ground. There is a reason that Fort Clinch has never been taken, nor a shot fired at it, because it is very hard to sneak up onto this fort. Union forces did actually gain control in 1862, where they had 28 gunboats in the waters around the harbor, but not a shot fired. The island attracted slaves to the Union lines, where they could gain freedom, and by 1863, 1,200 freed men and their children were living with 200 whites on the island. The site on the island is one of the places where the Freedmen's Relief Association was put to use to help the freed get resources, education, and other supplies. Amelia Island has continued to change and evolve and grow over time, with 3 distinct communities being on its shores. Fernandina Beach is probably the most well-known on the island. It did start as Old Town Fernandina and grew through changing governing bodies and times throughout its history. It's probably also one of the coolest little towns in Florida. Modern Fernandina really started in 1847 when Fort Clinch began to be built near what is present-day Fernandina, and it's really not that far. The third system fort was built to fortify the north end of the island at the entrance of the Cumberland Sound, which is what it overlooks on a bluff. The fort was used throughout the 1800s during the Civil War and Spanish-American War before it was put into caretaker status. The fort deteriorated some after it was abandoned due to not needing use after the Spanish-American War until the 1930s, when the Civilian Conservation Corps did restore the project for the fort. They restored it to its Civil War era status, which is what you would see it today, and the state of Florida did make it into a state park in 1938. The fort is on the National Register of Historic Places, and it is a living program where you can actually see reenactments of life at the fort. Now, we did go visit Fort Clinch recently. If you follow the Facebook page, you saw me check in there. And I will tell you, it is probably one of the coolest places I've ever been. We did get to see them doing some of the reenactments in costume. I felt so bad. It was so hot and humid that day, and it was going to rain. You can see the cannons. It is, you see some unfinished buildings, which is probably when they abandoned work. But I definitely recommend, if you're in the Jacksonville area, it's only about an hour north of Jacksonville, I recommend going to Fort Clinch. You pay I think it's $3 to get into the park, and then another $2.50 to get into the fort, but it is worth it, especially to walk around, to see the views from the bluff and the Cumberland Sound and the ocean. You can talk to the park rangers. They give guided tours, and just the beauty of the nature. You can go to the beach. I think this is probably one of the coolest Florida state parks ever. It is white sandy beaches. It is amazing. But Fort Clinch, as Florida history on its own, has probably, if those walls could talk, they could tell you so much. And yes, it actually does feel extremely haunted. I will tell you that right now. I got some really weird feelings in where they used to cook the food, and then even just walking through the port to go in over the moat. It did not see any battles, but it has definitely seen some things. But it is a very, very cool fort that I definitely recommend checking out if you get the chance to. Now, Fernandina did have some excitement in its time, other than being taken over at least 8 times. It did have a brief version of its own John Dillinger, named Harmon Murray, who was the leader of a criminal gang that actually operated out of Gainesville. Murray came to Fernandina to visit his sister and began to commit burglaries and robberies because he can't give up his old ways. Murray kept outrunning the police and taunting them with letters that he would not be taken alive. The Fernandina police and Nassau County Sheriff found out where he was staying, and they surrounded the house. But Murray was slick. He caught on, and he was not going to be taken. A gun battle ensued. He killed a deputy sheriff, as well as wounding Fernandina Police Chief James Higginbotham. Murray was wounded in the ensuing gun battle, but he did actually escape. He managed to evade a large manhunt and somehow got off the island, which is kind of surprising because it is not a big island. The city of Fernandina offered a reward for him, dead or alive. And Murray, though, he eventually did what every criminal does. He burned every bridge he had in Jacksonville, and the black community even turned on him because they were being harassed because of him. They wanted to know where he was, and they were tired of it, and so they were going to turn him in themselves. Murray was actually eventually killed on the road where he was shot in the back of the head by a shotgun as he walked with one of his friends from Long Pond, which is outside of Gainesville, to Archer. His friend actually shot him for the reward money. So, proof. Everything comes back to you at the end. Fernandina is a really nice old Florida town to go visit. Old Town Fernandina is a great place to explore. The Plaza San Carlos is really cool. Where the Spanish Fort San Carlos once stood, it's part of a state park. You can go visit. The Historic District is another part of Fernandina that offers shops, restaurants, and not Airbnbs, but beds and breakfasts. I love it. You can go to the Palace Saloon. You can see the Arnold Wurlitzer jukebox. You can see ornate wood carvings and tin ceilings. Do not expect a lot going into the saloon. But it's really good for a cheap drink and just a really cool look at Old Fernandina. It's one of the oldest saloons, I think, in Florida. It's dingy, but it is a really cool place to get one drink and just to take in some Florida history. As you walk along, you'll see an old post office, the town square. There's a really cool bookshop that I absolutely fell in love with. They have a little stuffed bear holding books. I know that's random, but it was really cute to me. There's some really great restaurants down there that have a view of the little harbor and the marina. I found something really cool that's got a really cool history tied to it. It's called Gregor McGregor's. Yes, the guy that took over. It's a putt-putt, but it is like alcoholic putt-putt. It's off one of the side streets. If you just look up Gregor McGregor's Fernandina Beach, you'll find it. But you can play putt-putt and you can drink. And they had beer, wine, frozen cocktails, regular cocktails. And it's 18 holes and it's challenging. Like, they're not just regular putt-putt, like you're just straight. No, like, you got to go around obstacles. You got to hit it through tunnels. You got to not hit it in water. It was so much fun and it was really great. It wasn't very crowded that day. But it was so cool, and it was just something nice, and it is family friendly, even though they serve alcohol. They do have other non-alcoholic drinks and snacks you can get, but it was such a cool little tie-in to the history. I don't think a lot of people got the historical tie-in, but it was such a cool little putt-putt place that's kind of off the beaten path that you can just go and you can have fun. But there's a lot of really cool little neat shops, a lot of ice cream places. It's a really cute small town that you can wander through and get some great seafood and pick up some souvenirs. And there's really cool pirate statues you can take pictures with and learn about the history of Florida. But I love Fernandina. And of course, the old historic district is on the riverside. So that's where you go to the little marina and see the boats and everything. There is an ocean side of the island as well, and you can go for some amazing beach views as well as restaurants. Sliders is over there. That's a pretty good one if you want to see it for some great views and some really good food. But of course, the city has both parks and state parks to explore. We found an amazing hotel, the Schoolhouse Inn. It's on Atlantic Boulevard. It's right down from the lighthouse and not far from where you drive down to go into Fort Clinch State Park. It is an old schoolhouse that they turned into a hotel, and it has a bar, the principal's office bar on the first floor. It's adult only. Sorry, guys, if you have kids, you can't. I mean, you can stay there, but the kids aren't going to get to stay there. But it's adult only, and it's all schoolrooms that they converted into hotel rooms. And the people running it are so friendly, and it is so close to all of the historic little old town Fernandina. It's really old. The historic district is so nice. These people were so amazing. They have a continental breakfast and coffee that you can get throughout the day and little snacks and popcorn bags you can pop. And the rooms were so clean and it was so nice. And it was just right around all the little restaurants. I cannot say enough about these people. And the principal's office bar had all these amazing craft cocktails, and the bartender, she was so nice. She talked to us about all the different whiskeys and bourbons and let us try different things and made amazing drinks. And if you are going to go to Fernandina, and it is, like I said, it's adults only, you need to check out the Schoolhouse Inn. I cannot recommend this place enough. And I usually don't tell you guys where I stay because I want to keep it a secret, but I want this place to have so much business. You need to stay there. And if you're looking for a great place to eat, Art Woodfire Grill and Pizza. It's over by Gregor McGregor's, and it was just like a 5-minute walk from the hotel. Is really good if you like pizza. It was really great. It was thin, it was crispy, it was wood-fired, the pepperonis were crispy, it wasn't too greasy, and that's another place I recommend to eat. And then there's a 1928 Cuban Bistro, which is all over Jacksonville, but I can never not recommend them because they have the best Cuban coffee. But if you're looking for a place in Fernandina to stay towards the historic district, definitely check out Schoolhouse Inn. I have to give them a shout out to this. But yeah, if you're looking for the beach side, also check out the Fernandina Beach part. You can find some amazing on the beach hotels and restaurants. You will not be disappointed. Fernandina Beach is also home to the Isle of 8 Flags Shrimp Festival, denoting the 8 flags that have flown over the island. And it's an annual festival that is normally held on the first weekend of May. The festival was originally referred to as the Shrimp Boat Festival. It was started in 1964. The events and activities include cooking and selling shrimp, displays and sales of arts, craft, collectibles, antiques, live music, a parade, fireworks, and the Miss Shrimp Festival pageant. It actually takes place also in the historic district, sort of back where I was talking about staying. And it's a really cool little part of town that you can explore things, and all the really cool stuff comes out. And it's a really cool little festival to let you get to explore and find new crafts and arts. And it's a fun little thing that Fernandina does just to keep its history alive. Now, another community that calls Amelia Island home is one that I don't think should be forgotten in Florida's history. And that is American Beach. American Beach is a historic beach community that also calls Amelia Island home. American Beach was once a popular vacation spot for African Americans, and this spot became popular during the segregation and Jim Crow era, when they were denied access to many public amenities such as public pools and beaches because people thought it would decrease the real estate value. That's right, back when people were being assholes. Florida's first African American millionaire and president of the Afro-American Life Insurance Company founded American Beach as a community that was most visited by African Americans, but all were welcome here as they were not going to do that. American Beach was founded in 1935 and instantly became popular from the time it was founded all the way through the 1950s. Summers were always busy with families. The community consisted of pretty much anything and everything: golf clubs, beaches, churches, hotels, restaurants, nightclubs, homes, rentals, and other businesses where African Americans could enjoy recreation and relaxation without the humiliation. And I think that's really cool. American Beach actually stayed successful until it was hit hard in 1964, unfortunately, by Hurricane Dora, where many of the buildings were destroyed. Also, the Civil Rights Act in 1964 desegregated all of Florida beaches, making it accessible to anyone. So many didn't see American Beach as just a necessity anymore, and people could go to Jacksonville beaches that were closer to home. And that was the unfortunate part of American Beach, is that it was so far away. A lot of people had to go to beaches that were segregated for African Americans, and they were so far away from their homes. So giving them a place that was just their own was nice, and that was the cool thing about American Beach, was it was just for them, and they could have their, without the humiliation. And I think it's so cool that this was founded, and this is such a cool little town to go to as well. There's actually a really cool little museum in this little historic district as well that you can visit. Now, American Beach unfortunately was deteriorating until 1977 when Miss Betch, A.L. Lewis's granddaughter, better known to locals as the Beach Lady, actually came back and fought for that preservation. She wanted to save American Beach as a monument to African Americans' determination to overcome the segregation era. American Beach was officially listed as a historic site on the National Register of Historic Places in 2001, and the area was donated to the National Park Service, and the American Beach Museum opened in 2014. And that's a cool museum. I recommend anybody in the area to go visit it. And it really does memorialize the history of American Beach, and it's a history that shouldn't be forgotten. Amelia Island is also just such a cool place. It's full of history. It's full of history of determination, of people that shouldn't be forgotten. It's a very small island, and it just holds all this history that a lot of people overlook. It's full of notable historical events from the very early history all the way to the present day, showing just the determination of people to take what should be theirs. The island is quiet, and it is mostly a great spot to be able to watch the sunrise, see the wildlife, get some amazing food, but also probably run into Florida Man. Sorry guys, he is up there too. Today's Florida Man comes to us from Brevard County. Yeah, Brevard County. Lots happens in Brevard County if you've ever been down there. And of course, this Florida man just wanted to play Frogger, literally, on I-95. He wanted to play human Frogger on I-95. He was going 110 miles an hour on I-95, which, I mean, let's face it. All right, guys, 110 on I-95 is actually not that bad. I mean, isn't the speed limit on 95 like 90 anyways? Seriously, though. It's 95. Like, if you're not going 90, you're probably getting run over anyways. But he was pulled over, and he began to play human Frogger. He yelled, "I'm sorry" to the cop, jumped out, and began to run across the lanes of traffic. I mean, I'm impressed that he did not get hit. And he didn't get hit. He was actually found hiding in the buffer preserve near Fellsmere. So, yeah, I don't recommend playing human Frogger on 95, 475, or any highway in Florida because people be crazy. So just remember, guys, don't do drugs. Thank you for listening today, guys. Hope you found somewhere new to explore the next time you're in Florida. Definitely recommend Fernandina. It's an amazing area. Fort Clinch is an amazing state park to check out. It's some really cool little area, especially if you're in Jacksonville or St. Augustine. It's only 2 hours from St. Augustine. It's a really cool place to check out if you're looking for a day trip. Hope you guys have an amazing week. Don't forget to drink your water, wear your sunscreen. As always, guys, that's your daily dose of sunshine.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.